Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. And thank you for that introduction where you promoted me to doctor. So I don't yet have that credential, but okay then, I'll take it. So congratulations to the Green E Award recipients. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Um, oh, okay. Um, I want to start off by just showing, okay, it's animated, by showing this slide that demonstrates where we are right now as far as the climate and levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, that actually shows that greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are at levels higher than in the past 400,000 years. And this unprecedented increase has led to many of the changes that we're seeing in the climate now. Scientists have been studying this problem for decades. And the science suggests that this is, in fact, a real problem and that humans have contributed to it. I know that everyone doesn't agree with this necessarily. I think maybe many of you in the audience do. But there are people leading businesses out in the world who don't necessarily agree with this science. But even for those who are not convinced, certainly there's enough evidence to warrant that consideration of the climate crisis as a risk in any business strategy, any current business strategy, because the science suggests that there will be effects that will impact businesses, supply chains. So even if, for those who are not convinced about the climate crisis, in order to be a good business strategist, it has to be taken into consideration. Now, Project Drawdown is a nonprofit research organization, but I also like to think of it as a startup. Like a startup, it focused on something new that wasn't being offered elsewhere in the market. Let me define drawdown as we're using it here. It's the point when levels of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere begin to decline year to year. So one of the offerings that Project Drawdown brings as a startup is this definition of drawdown, and our attempt to make this a commonly used definition when we're talking about the climate crisis. Now, another thing that I think Project Drawdown is doing as a startup is trying to disrupt the climate space by naming an ambitious goal. And we're naming drawdown as the goal, that we not just slow the rise of greenhouse gases, but that we actually move toward decreasing the concentrations, which will ultimately, we think, lead to reversing global warming. So we think this is an ambitious goal that had not been a common goal. The common goal had been, let's mitigate the damage, let's slow the rise, and we actually propose reversing the concentrations. Now, another disruptive change we'd like to make is to shift the worldwide conversation about the climate crisis from one of doom, despair, to excuse me, just a little bit nervous. So yeah, what we're proposing is shifting the conversation from not just further definition of the problem and the discouragement that comes along with the magnitude of the problem to a conversation more about what can we do about the problem, what are the solutions available, and what is the possibility and the opportunity that is presented to us right now. Now, the question that Project Drawdown has set out to answer is drawdown possible? So we know that there are solutions out there. We knew there was a great problem statement by scientists for decades, but what if this problem exists, and we know there are some solutions out there, is it actually possible to reach drawdown? So we set out to answer this question and to look at existing solutions only. So not at silver bullet technologies that haven't yet been invented, but to look at what humanity was already doing around the world and see if there's actually a plan to get us to drawdown. So for the past, since 2015, Project Drawdown's research team has been working on collecting and analyzing the best available data on climate solutions, conducting a meta-analysis of peer-reviewed and widely cited sources, and developing models that are designed to evaluate the individual solutions and also integrated sectors of solutions over a 30-year period. And so those of you who in the business school may be interested in knowing that this started with using Excel models so that they would be accessible to anyone who needed to use them. So our team built a series of more than 80 Excel models to do this analysis. As they went on with building the models, they became increasingly complex. Initially, our idea was to make them open source, share them widely on our website, but as the complexity of the models increased, we saw that we'd need a better distribution model. So we actually are in the process of translating these into a Python application that will be available publicly. But I will get to that a little bit later. This is many of the 75 researchers to date who have worked on this research project. They are from 25 countries on 6 continents. And in 2017, we published the initial results of this research in this book, Drawdown. Now, this was a first of its kind study because it's an apples to apples comparison of solutions. So all of the greenhouse gas impact has been converted to carbon dioxide equivalents, allowing us to compare all the solutions from various sectors in a common measurement for their impact on greenhouse gases. Now, this is a global analysis. It's not just focused on the United States. We looked at solutions happening worldwide. Many of them are applicable in the United States. Many are not. Some are scaling in other parts of the world faster than in other parts, and some may never be able to take hold worldwide, but they will be more applicable in certain geographic areas. So this is a global analysis of what's possible over a 30-year period if use of these solutions increases worldwide at a vigorous but also plausible rate. So we project the impact on greenhouse gas concentrations, as well as the projected costs or savings to implement the solution at scale compared to business as usual, compared to what we're already doing. So for instance, use of wind turbines is compared to what it would cost to produce electricity using conventional fossil fuel methods. Now, every solution in the world did not make it into this analysis. the analysis had to be bounded in order to make it possible to do it in the first place. So to qualify, a solution had to meet these criteria. First, it had to be currently available and also scaling somewhere in the world. It had to be already shown to be financially viable. So we're not including solutions that will be impossible to, or impractical to implement and scale. The solution had to be proven to reduce greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. We also had another criteria is that any negative consequences of the solution would be outweighed by its positive benefits. So there are many solutions that would actually cause more harm than good. Those did not make it into this analysis. And lastly, there had to be sufficient data existing to allow us to do this quantitative analysis. So new solutions for which there's not enough data would not make it into the analysis. However, we did include 20 solutions that we called coming attractions, and those are the ones that many of them did not fit those criteria. They're promising, but still nascent, and there's not yet enough evidence to show that they could scale and be practical for implementation. So in defining the parameters of this research project, our modelers also had to make some key assumptions. I want to let you know what those are. So first, we assume that any necessary policies required to scale these solutions would already be in place. We estimated costs and prices conservatively, and they're based on historical trends. So, and we did not model financial impacts where the costs were too variable or too localized. And then finally, we have not assumed any major technological advances in this analysis. So it's all existing solutions. So a simple way to look at the solutions included in drawdown is this. There are two broad categories of how to reach drawdown. First is the up arrow with the X. These are solutions that reduce the amount of greenhouse gases going up into the atmosphere. So, and those are solutions that either replace energy from fossil fuels with renewable energy or reduce our consumption of resources through conservation and technological efficiency. And then the down arrow is the solutions, the biosequestration solutions, the solutions that bring carbon back home out of the atmosphere and back into the earth. And these are solutions that allow trees and plants to draw carbon out of the atmosphere. So the solutions included in drawdown, there are 80 solutions that were modeled. They span a wide array of sectors. So often technologies are what first come to mind when we think about climate solutions. So, and those sectors are certainly included, the electricity generation, renewable energy solutions, building efficiency solutions, transportation such as electric vehicles and mass transit, and material solutions such as recycling and alternative cement. But we also included a broader range of solutions. So food system solutions, land use solutions, and universal health and education. Solutions that are not what first come to mind usually, but we're hoping to change that notion. So I want to give you a glimpse at some of the solutions that were included. Clean cook stoves, 40% of humans use wood, charcoal, animal dung, crop residues, and coal as cooking fuel. And so millions of people die every year from heart and lung disease caused by inhaling smoke from cooking with these carbon-emitting fuels. So this is a solution that's an example of what we call a no-regret solution, solutions that we should implement even if there were no climate crisis. because this solution, in addition to reducing the amount of carbon emitted to the atmosphere, also has a very large impact on human health. Okay. Electric bikes. So some of these solutions are used primarily in other parts of the world. We do see electric bikes in the US, but actually most of the electric bikes that were sold, are sold in China. And e-bikes are the most common and the fastest selling alternative fuel vehicle. There were 31 million of them sold in 2012, and 95% of those in China. So this is a solution, an example of a solution that's scaling primarily in other parts of the world. We don't grow a lot of rice in the US. And this is primarily in Asia and primarily used among smallholder farmers. And it's methods of growing rice that don't involve having the rice paddies flooded consistently. They're drained, and that presents that lessens the impact of the microbes that cause the methane emission by rice cultivation. So we know that uplifting the rights of indigenous people is a human rights issue. It's also an important climate solution. Indigenous people around the world use a variety of practices that reduce emissions and increase biosequestration of carbon. Studies show that the best outcomes for carbon drawdown happen when indigenous people have legal control over their land. So actually this is a solution where there's an important policy consideration. So it's not enough that indigenous people live on the land, but also that they have autonomy over how that land is managed, because their traditional practices result in greater biosequestration than if they were not managing the land. So I want to show you some of the insights that came out of this research and modeling. So this is based on their impact on concentrations of greenhouse gases. These are the top 20 of the 80 solutions that we modeled. Five of the solutions in the top 20 are renewable electricity solutions. And this is no surprise. I think we know that shifting to 100% renewable energy is essential to addressing the climate crisis. But what was surprising is we found that 8 of the top 20 were food system solutions. And these solutions relate to how we produce food, what we eat, and how much we waste. So when we produce food in a way that's in harmony with nature, there's a significant benefit. Wasted food emits 8% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Enough that if food were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter behind the United States and China. Here in the US, 1/3 of food is wasted after it reaches the consumer, which means that we each have a role to play in this solution. Silvopasture is one of the sort of interesting solutions because it's not widely known in the U.S., so it's a bit of a surprise. It involves integrating trees into pasture land. Studies show that pastures that include trees sequester 5 to 10 times more carbon than pastures without. If only 2% of global grassland were devoted to silvopasture, there's the potential to remove and store roughly 31 billion tons of carbon dioxide between 2020 and 2050. The Costa Rican, Colombian, and Nicaraguan governments all offer payments to ranchers to convert to silvopasture. So this solution has taken hold in Central and South America. In Costa Rica, 50% of pastures now incorporate trees. So this is another insight that if you combine both the food system solutions and the land use solutions, you get it's a significant number of the top 20 most impactful solutions. What this says to me is that we can trust Earth. Earth's been doing this a long time and knows the best ways to balance our atmosphere. So universal health and education. There are two solutions that fall in this category. So universal education, especially in educating girls, and access to family planning have the potential to have a very big impact on emissions because they will help us slow the rate of population growth. 62 million girls in the world are denied education. But studies show that when girls do have access to education, are able to have an education, they have more agency to choose when they marry and when they have children, resulting in fewer and healthier children. Girls who are educated have higher wages, more upward mobility. Maternal and child mortality drop when girls are educated. And this is the most powerful means of breaking intergenerational poverty. Also, girls who are educated better cope with natural disasters and extreme weather. So there's multiple cascading benefits from this solution, in addition to it helping with the climate crisis. Providing health care and meeting women's express needs for contraception in both high-income countries and low-income countries is also a very impactful solution. It's actually most impactful when women have and couples have access to family planning in the U.S. because per capita, our carbon emissions footprint is so much higher in the U.S. and developed countries. So I've talked a bit about some of the most impactful solutions, those in the top 20. But what's important to understand is that all of the solutions are equally important. The drawdown solutions are a system, and part of our analysis has involved integration of those solutions. The individual solutions are integrated within and across systems to avoid for double counting, ensure that markets are not overestimated, and that the same land is not used twice for different purposes in our analysis. And our integration analysis also accounts for the effects of how solutions interact with each other. So thinking that we can just pick the top 20 and accomplish reversing global warming is completely not true. We need all 80 of the solutions, and they all work together as a system. So the book Drawdown is available. I've heard that there might be a few copies on this campus, but I also want to point out that the same information and actually more information is available at drawdown.org, especially for anyone who wants to take a deep dive into specific solutions. We have technical assessments there, reference lists. We have sector summaries. We show the integration. We show diagrams of how the integration interactions within systems. So there's quite a bit more information there. A lot about the methodology used in the modeling. So I encourage any students who are interested to take a look there. And I think that is it. I would be happy to answer any questions.